And we're kicking off our Survivor Series WarGames coverage with the Women's World Championship, as Zoey Stark gave her all against Rhea Ripley, but it wasn't enough to dethrone the Judgment Day's mommy. Instead, Ripley extended her title reign beyond 239 days, but Stark had quite the showing in arguably the biggest match of her career to date. Stark had challenged Ripley at WWE Crown Jewel earlier this month, but she was one of 4 challengers in Saudi Arabia, while this week's show was singles action. After winning a Battle Royal on Raw to earn this title match, Ripley gave a good outing at Survivor Series, even if she never seemed to get any consistent momentum. Instead, anytime it seemed that Stark had things going her way, Ripley re-established herself, and this was best exemplified in the finish. As Stark looked to land her own finisher, Ripley reversed into the Riptide for the pinfall, and while she rarely had momentum, Zoey was able to match Ripley's physicality in the ring. It remains to be seen how Triple H and Creative will follow up with Stark, and whether this show was the establishing of a new star, or yet another woman Ripley has beaten. What's next for Rhea Ripley? Will a rematch with Starks be in the works, or could Raquel Rodriguez, Nia Jax, or maybe even Becky Lynch step up to the plate? Let us know in the comments. Ripley had quite the interesting look for Survivor Series, complete with leather chaps, and on Twitter, fans were wondering if this was a tribute to a name from the past. On social media, names like Luna Vachon and Shawn Michaels were discussed as possible inspirations for the attire. And what do you think of Mommy's unique attire? WWE Survivor Series saw plenty of big names appear on the show, but one of the biggest names in wrestling remained backstage throughout the broadcast. Fightful Select were the first to report that Stephanie McMahon was backstage at Survivor Series, but this shouldn't be signed as a return to power for the former WWE chairwoman. McMahon's presence at the show was seemingly just a visit, and it's been reported that WWE officials were happy to see her and openly expressed a desire for Stephanie to return. Stephanie announced that she was taking a break from WWE in mid-2022, but swiftly returned to fill her father's role after he stepped down. And while this week was just a visit, she could be doing more down the line. Survivor Series saw Gunther retain the Intercontinental Championship, but the Austrian will never underestimate The Miz after this show. Despite his early hubris, Gunther found himself in a fight against the scrappy, resilient veteran challenger, enduring a low blow and nearly lost the title after a skull-crushing finale. Miz dug into his bag of tricks and broke out a Bret Hart-inspired figure 4 around the ring post, to which Michael Cole expressed Miz's love for the Hitman growing up. Ultimately, Der Ring General overcame the tenacity of The Miz and tapped him out with a half Boston Crab while digging his knee into The Miz's back for good measure. Miz's toughness was on display here as he absorbed everything thrown at him and still mustered enough to nearly beat the champ, and the crowd were hot and wanted a title change. As to who will dethrone Gunther, who knows, but as long as he has matches of this quality, long may the Ring General reign. Since Dragon Lee joined WWE, the words promising and potential have followed him, which has been shown in his booking in NXT and the main roster. Just a few weeks ago, Dragon Lee had the biggest opportunity of his career when he challenged NXT North American champion Dominic Mysterio, and while he didn't win, he did enough to secure a spot on SmackDown. Since then, Lee has looked unstoppable in the ring, and after coming to the rescue of Carlito on this week's episode of SmackDown, found himself in a PLE match with Santos Escobar. Escobar started off hot and immediately got the jump on Lee and took things outside the ring, putting Lee's leg in between the stairs in an attempt to take out the masked star. This was the same spot Escobar injured Rey Mysterio with, and Santos also attempted to pull off Lee's mask, but Lee battled back and got a near fall on a sit-down powerbomb. Lee put on a good show against Escobar in the biggest match since his call-up, but ended up on the losing side of things, giving him his first singles loss as part of the main roster. Escobar is riding a wave of momentum following his betrayal of Rey, and this was an excellent match showcasing 2 men with bright futures in WWE. For some time, Bayley has faced scrutiny for her recent losses, and questions about her role in the revamped Damage Control have been raised, with some expecting her to be kicked out. Inside WarGames, Bayley gave her all to try and prove herself to her allies, but her all was not enough as she found herself driven through a table and beaten to kick off the show. Bayley, Asuka, Kairi Sane, and Io Sky were beaten by Charlotte Flair, Bianca Belair, Becky Lynch, and Shotzi, despite Bayley repeatedly making the save for her team. The heels entered wearing different masks, creating a cool visual, and while not an official competitor, Dakota Kai interfered, allowing Bayley to gain the upper hand on Lynch in the opening moments. That was before Shotzi entered, giving the faces the numbers advantage, and it's always strange to have the faces have the numbers edge, and goes against wrestling psychology. That doesn't stop WWE from booking one of 2 matches a year like this, and there was plenty of action in this hard-hitting contest to open the show. Belair whipped Sky with her braid, causing the champion to let out a blood-curdling scream, and Sky would once again use her trash can spot off the top of the cage, which will always be awesome. Lynch and Flair popped the crowd big time with a mid-ring hug, putting their tumultuous history behind them. In a very cool spot, Asuka tried to miss Shotzi for the second time, but Shotzi ducked and Belair sprayed the Empress with a fire extinguisher, but the MVP of this match has to be Bayley. The role model went the distance as she started the match for the heels, but it was a KOD from Belair and a Uranagi from Lynch through a table that led to Damage Control's defeat. This was the appropriate feud closer, with a finish that should propel the Damage Control story forward, presumably to the point where her teammates excommunicate Bayley from the group she founded. In the process, this will set up a babyface turn for Bayley, who was once WWE's most beloved underdog, giving the role model a new and exciting role on TV. For months now, tensions have been simmering in the group, especially in regard to Bayley's status as leader, and her grip over the group has loosened as of late. If a face turn is in order, it could be that Bayley challenges Io Sky for the WWE Women's title in a turning point for the faction. But why else may Damage Control have taken this loss? Well, it could be to set up somebody else to feud with WWE Women's Champion Io Sky. Perhaps Shotzi or Becky Lynch could be the next to challenge Sky, who is now in month 3 of her reign, especially since they have bragging rights over the Damage Control member. With that said, it could be a different SmackDown superstar who steps up and senses weakness in Damage Control, and we'll have to stay tuned to what's to come. Now, when pro wrestling is done right, there's nothing better, and this year's Men's Survivor Series match was the epitome of done right. The Judgment Day and Drew McIntyre were in a dominant position late in WarGames, with Cody Rhodes, Jey Uso, Sami Zayn, and Seth Rollins reeling before Randy Orton appeared. The Viper earned a thunderous response from the crowd, and from there the babyfaces fought their way back into the match, with each delivering their signature moves. It was ultimately Cody Rhodes who earned the win by flattening Damian Priest with a crossroads in a match that delivered on multiple accounts. There was tension from the start between Damian Priest and Drew McIntyre, with neither trusting the other while on the same team, but Drew proved to be loyal to his allies. During the match, McIntyre and Jey Uso teed off in a logical spot that had the fans red hot, and an extended feud should be next for the pair. Michael Cole was on fire on commentary as he mentioned that Dusty Rhodes created WarGames on July 4th, 1987, and now his son Cody was competing in the match for the first time ever. Cole went even further, pointing out that Cody also created an event in this city, referencing the industry-changing All In back in 2018. Speaking of Cody's father, the use of the cowbell felt appropriate, as did the babyface's beatdown on Dirty Dom, which earned an enormous pop from the crowd. WWE also teased that Randy Orton wasn't going to be in the match, presumably preserving the pop for later in the match, and said pop blew the roof off of the Allstate Arena, and rightly so. At one point, Orton was about to attack Damian Priest when he suddenly focused on Jey Uso, teasing issues between the two. Orton was ready to hit an RKO on Jey, but then decided against it and had a tense face-off with him when Mr. Money in the Bank was about to attack Orton. The Viper then hit an RKO on Dominic to another huge pop from the fans, but it's clear that Orton, like Drew McIntyre, has not forgotten about Jey's past. It was last year that Jey and Jimmy Uso defeated RK Bro to unify the Raw and SmackDown tag team titles, and the Bloodline brutally beat up the duo as that show went off the air. That attack would explain Orton's hiatus. That finally came to an end tonight, but the Apex Predator has not forgotten what happened. As the faces stood tall, WWE's copyrighted logo appeared on the screen and the show seemed over until Living Color's Cult of Personality played over the PA system. After months of speculation and rumors, CM Punk walked back onto WWE TV as a wrestler for the first time in close to a decade, earning the biggest pop of the night. The images of the Chicago fans giddily jumping up and down, chanting his name and embracing him was the perfect ending to the show, proving that anything can happen in wrestling. The fans may have been thrilled to see CM Punk, but Seth Rollins clearly wasn't, as in fan-recorded footage, the World Heavyweight Champion looked nothing short of furious. It even appeared that Rollins had to be held back at one point, and we'll have to see if this was simply teasing a Punk feud, or if there is much more real resentment from the champion. Punk didn't target anyone or get physically involved, but made for an extraordinary cliffhanger to close the show, coming off the heels of a Match of the Year candidate main event. Speaking on the post-Survivor Series press conference, Triple H addressed how Punk's return came together. He said, "This came together super quick, which is why it stayed very tight. There was a lot of speculation, and that point it was nothing but speculation. For most of the time it was speculation. It didn't really come to fruition until everybody stopped thinking it was going to happen, and then all of a sudden it was happening. But I am extremely excited. A lot of time has gone by, almost 10 years, and if you're the same person you were 10 years ago, 10 years later, you messed up. Everybody grows, everybody changes, and I'm a different person, he's a different person, this is a different company, and we're all on the same, even starting ground. So what's next for CM Punk? That'll be interesting. I'm interested to see that myself. I know whatever it is, it'll be talked about, it'll be exciting, and it'll be a thrill ride for the WWE Universe no matter what it is. And I'm thrilled. We're all thrilled to have him back here, and to have him back, cliche to say, back home with WWE where he belongs. Sean Ross Sapp took to X, Twitter, in light of CM Punk's incredible return at Survivor Series. Sapp revealed that Punk told at least one person close to him that he had an hour-long talk with Triple H last week. It was further added, even creative had no idea about Punk's return. Even people in production had no idea. Prior to Survivor Series, Punk's old nemesis Ryback had claimed that he'd retire from wrestling if Punk returned, but in a follow-up tweet, he said he meant he'd retire if Punk returned to AEW. Punk or no Punk, Ryback has not wrestled a match in years, and this promise and subsequent backtracking was the latest ploy for attention by the ex-star. CM Punk's return will go down in history as unforgettable, and while this was as fan-serving a finale as there had been in recent memory, that's hardly a bad thing. And we're ending with some breaking news now as Drew McIntyre stormed out of the ring after Cody Rhodes' team won a WarGames match. Mike Johnson of PWInsider.com provided details about what reportedly happened backstage. PW Insider is told that McIntyre stormed into the back, slammed his locker room door, threw on a hoodie, and immediately left the Allstate Arena. We are told that it was obvious to everyone that McIntyre was angry, but no word yet as to why. It was such a loud and obvious situation that a lot of people witnessed it, and it's become a subject of conversation over the last hour. Sean Ross Sapp of Fightful.com also wrote that McIntyre was visibly upset even backstage after WWE Survivor Series and left the building. Video footage of McIntyre leaving the ring was captured. Stay tuned to Slat Rock Wrestling for more. So, how was WWE Survivor Series? Sound off in the comments below.